Hi, welcome to today's show. I'm so glad you guys are able to join us for America at its best and see the impact that you are making possible through your partnership with our network. So today we're going to be talking about schools reopening. There's no doubt this has been a rough year on parents, students, and teachers. First, I want you guys to know that your partnership with this network has resulted in a very big effort to get schools to reopen safely. At the same time, this network has been looking at ways to leverage this disruption so that we can create more opportunities and choice for students all across the country. Many of you probably know by now that recently a huge school choice bill was passed in West Virginia thanks to the Cardinal Institute. I think we're going to see more of those wins as the days go on through these legislative sessions. So thank you for making all of that possible. Of course, today, we're here to bring you a story about how the Liberty Justice Center went up against the Chicago Teachers Union and won. We all love those kinds of stories. We're going to be joined by our friend Diana Rickert, the Liberty Justice Institute, to tell us a little bit about what happened. Diana, welcome to the show.
Hi, Rebecca. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here with us. Now, for those who don't know, can you start by telling us a little bit about Liberty Justice Center?
Yeah, so the Liberty Justice Center is a team of constitutional attorneys who put very simply sue the government, sue government unions, and anybody who is infringing on Americans' most fundamental constitutional rights.
And let me just say this for you because you're probably much too nice to say it. Liberty Justice Center, they're the ones who put Janus on the map. You guys took on that case along with National Right to Work, and you guys went national, in some ways viral after that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. So we are the law firm that brought the Janus case to the Supreme Court, and we litigated that case together with our friends at the National Right to Work Legal Defense Fund. And since winning the Janus case, Janus versus AFSCME at the Supreme Court, Liberty Justice Center has expanded across the country, and we are now fighting 45 different lawsuits in 23 different states.
45 lawsuits, 23 states. That's amazing. Now help us understand, where exactly is there a place for a conservative law firm in Chicago of all places?
Yeah, so we are based in Chicago, which is where we were started. That is absolutely the place where a conservative law firm should be based because it is ripe for abuse of Americans' constitutional rights. And the latest example that we have is really in this case in Chicago public schools, where we were fighting on behalf of parents to get kids back to school.
So back up for a second. You guys took on Chicago teachers unions. I think one thing that would help us for you to talk about how powerful the Chicago Teachers Union really is compared to others.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Chicago. I know their ways very well. And now that we're working nationally, Chicago really stands out in the country. They are the most militant teachers union in the United States. So when the leader of the American Federation of Teachers or the National Education Association comes out and says, this is a strategy we're going to deploy to keep schools closed in the name of safety and health and COVID, the number one union that follows that directive lockstep is the Chicago Teachers Union. They wage more strikes than most other unions in the country in major cities. They have very strong membership ranks. They have very strong political views, and they leverage every contract negotiation to pursue all sorts of progressive ideals that have nothing to do with education.
So had they kept schools closed this entire time since COVID hit?
That's right. So if you're a high schooler in Chicago, you are still not back in school. High schoolers have not been in school in Chicago in over a year. Fortunately, due to some of the work we're going to talk about today, elementary school students are back in the classroom, but they had not been in school since March of last year. And while a lot of the private and parochial schools and even many public schools across the state of Illinois opened in August for school with safety precautions, Chicago public schools teachers refused to go back.
Wow. Okay, so share your strategy to build up to this moment where kids started going back to school.
Yeah, so it really started back at the start of the school year. The city had two kinds of students, the kids that were in CPS, the Chicago Public School System, who were not allowed to go back, And everybody else that did get to go back, the kids in the Catholic schools or the private schools or the Christian schools, any school that was not part of the CPS system. And so over the months into the school year, parents started getting frustrated. They kept asking, when are my kids going back? New Year's passed, the kids still weren't back. There was no plan for them to return. And these conversations started to hit a boiling point in January when the union was very publicly negotiating with the school district to keep schools closed. And the mayor of Chicago came out and said, hey, we need to get these schools open. And the CTU president, the Chicago Teachers Union president, will come out and say, no, we can't. And here's all the demands you need to meet if we're going to open schools. And that's when we partnered with a local 501c4 on the ground in Illinois called the Illinois Opportunity Project. And they connected us with groups of parents that were mobilizing to try to get schools open. They didn't know what to do, but they knew that they were fed up and they were ready to stand up to the union. So we were connected with them. We signed them on as clients and we became their lawyers. And we brought that fight to the union.
Wow. So how hard was it to get parents to actually sue the union?
So here's what we did. We represented parents who were very concerned. And let me tell you, for every 10 parents we talked to, 9 of them are afraid to take on the union. They are terrified of the teachers union. They believe the teachers will retaliate against their children in the classroom. They think they'll be ostracized by their community, that their neighbors will hate them, that they'll have to move or switch schools and they don't have the means to do so. So the parents that we were able to sign, they were true heroes. These people were very brave. They were willing to take on this fight. And so we deployed kind of like a multi-step strategy to put pressure on the union in a way that the city and the mayor and outsiders could not do. We were able to partner with these parents to give them a voice in this fight and leverage up their concerns through the media, through the threat of suing the union, and other means to make sure their voice was heard, because they could bring to this conversation a perspective and a stakeholder position that nobody else had.
So you guys were able to infiltrate the media with your message and with the stories of these parents?
That's right. So once we observed that the negotiations between the union and the mayor's office and the school district were breaking down, our lawyers got to work trying to figure out, what can we do? Illinois is a very blue state. It's very much a union stronghold. So what can we do? And we devised a legal strategy that was really based on 2 findings. One, that the Chicago Teachers Union had just signed a contract promising no more strikes. They go on strike so much that they actually wrote into their new contract that we promise we won't go on strike for these 2 to 3 years that we're under contract. And 2, Illinois labor law actually specifies when you can and cannot strike. Keeping schools closed for in-person learning does not qualify as a reason to go on strike. So armed with that information, we were able to empower these parents. And we started out by placing a very prominent op-ed piece by one of our senior attorneys in the Chicago Tribune, the most read newspaper in the market and in the Midwest. And we took that op-ed and we started circulating it throughout all the Chicago media. We put our parents on camera. They went on the radio, they talked to the newspaper, they went on TV, and they brought their message that we are fed up. And if you shut down schools by going on strike to keep them closed, if you keep our schools closed to in-person learning, we will see you in court. And when the Chicago Teachers Union took that message out of the Chicago market and tried to leverage their fight nationally and made the rounds on CNN and all of the national news outlets, we brought our parents there too. Using these relationships that we built during the Janus case and that we've built in our national casework, we were able to place our parents, these heroes, on Fox News Channel, get them on the phone with national reporters and tell them what's going on and that parents won't stand for it anymore.
And so did you end up going to court?
We were able to avert a lawsuit by having the papers ready, being ready to file, taking our message that we would sue them, but without having to actually sue them. By the time the school district and the union and the parents all reached about early February, the union knew that we were going to sue them and that we would win. They knew what was in their contract. They knew what was in state law. And right before the teachers union members were asked to vote on returning to school, union leadership actually told them that unless they accepted the deal that they had struck to return to school, they would probably face legal ramifications if they went on strike. That means us, that means our parents that were willing to sue them. So we were able to put pressure on them and influence the negotiations and everything that was happening without having to go all the way to court, but knowing that if we needed to take that step, those parents were ready and we were ready and the law was on our side.
What about other states? Are you able to take this kind of approach and replicate it there?
Absolutely. So there are a number of states in the country where public worker strikes are illegal. This is a tremendous tool on the side of taxpayers and parents and citizens. And so we have been working with other parents and other members of the state policy network all across the country to take those laws and actually enforce them. A lot of our friends and our allies may remember a few years ago when the teachers unions had a campaign called Red for Ed. And basically these teachers unions would launch sick outs or strikes that were illegal in order to pressure school districts to meet their contract demands. They realized back then that no one was willing to enforce the law when they went on an illegal strike.
Mhm.
Well, we are, our parents are, they're willing to enforce the law and we're here to help them pro bono and to take all of the pain out of the legal process at the same time. So early last year, one of the national union leaders had sent in a message out to the teachers unions that illegal strikes and sick outs were going to be one of the tools they would deploy to keep schools closed during this COVID time. So we started going to work, looking at all the states where strikes are illegal. And we had probably one of our most successful partnerships with the Idaho Freedom Foundation over in Idaho, when the largest school district in the state was due to open and the teachers union launched an illegal strike, shutting schools down on the very day they were meant to open. We sued there together with our partners at Idaho Freedom Foundation. And not only did the union back down, they admitted in court that what they did was wrong and illegal and they wouldn't do it again. It was a huge victory for parents. And ever since we deployed that strategy, the unions have been taking a very different approach when they hear that we're coming to town with a team of parents to enforce state law.
There's no doubt that the Liberty Justice Center has really put unions in their place and helped to level the playing field over the course of the last 3 years, especially. You mentioned working with the Idaho Freedom Foundation and others in this network. Can you share how and what your approach is when you go into the network to partner?
Yeah, I've mentioned that we have expanded all across the country since winning the Janus case, and we are litigating from coast to coast. I will tell you, Rebecca, the very first call that we make when we are looking at a new state and a possible litigation opportunity is to our SPN friend and partner in that state. We call and we find out what's happening on the ground. What are people saying? Has anybody looked into litigation? Are citizens angry and upset about this? Do you think you can help us with clients or plaintiffs? Is this a fight we should avoid? What are the stakes in this fight? Who are the players? And we could not do the work that we are doing across the country without the state policy network. No question.
Good to know. All right, well, let's move into some questions from the audience. If you've got a question, please add it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. First question is from our friend Ed Johnson. Ed, welcome back to the show. It's so good to see that you're here with us. Ed wanted to know more about the constraints on the students returning to the classroom. What kind of things have you been seeing that is making it difficult?
Yeah, so the classroom experience really varies for students depending on where they live, and interestingly, how strong the teachers union is in a particular school district. In some school districts and in some schools, it's a very normal classroom experience. You go to school, you have your parents that can volunteer in the classroom, you've got your workbooks, your team time, and it's pretty normal. Other school districts have a lot of restrictions. I have seen everything from the masking requirement to tape on the floor around students' desks, telling them that they cannot leave this taped box while they have their mask on, with a hand sanitizer on their desk and a plastic shield all around them. We have schools that are requiring asymptomatic students to take COVID tests in order to gain entry into their school. And these tests are done on a regular basis. Some of the tests aren't very reliable. Some of them have been known to show false positives, and classrooms and schools are being shut down on the basis of possibly faulty tests. You have other schools that are saying we're open, but their kids only come in for 3 hours twice a week. And that's definitely not a full-time education. And students who, especially those who are at the margins, who have no other options, who do not have the option of private school or homeschooling or home tutoring or anything else, whose parents are essential workers and are not able to give them the attention that they need, are really missing out. And it's a huge tragedy, and it's terrible. And unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be resolved by the end of this school year. A lot of school districts are already saying, well, this year was a wash. But what they don't realize is that these kids, they can't give a year of their childhood up. They need that instruction day in and day out. So we're fighting to do everything that we can. But I have to be honest that it is a very difficult situation for students and parents across the country.
Diana, can you talk a little bit more about some of the demands the teachers unions were making that had nothing to do with actually getting back into the classroom?
Yeah, this teachers unions, especially the militant teachers unions, like the teachers union in Los Angeles and in Chicago and in New York, they are experts at taking a contract negotiation and turning it into everything but school related. So in Chicago, for example, the teachers union was pushing for defunding police and changes to the city's homeless policy and like public housing policy. The teachers union would even say, well, we're requiring 6 feet of distancing, even though the CDC says you only need 3 feet of distancing. We're requiring every teacher to be vaccinated before we go back, even though the CDC says that's not required. In Los Angeles, the teachers union is actually talking about mandatory vaccination for all students before they can go back, which there is not even a vaccine with emergency approval in the country right now for elementary age students. And so the unions definitely saw this as an opportunity to flex their muscle and exploit the situation. And the victims here, of course, are the children.
And are you seeing that all over the country?
Yes. And again, it's the very large militant unions that have been emboldened by politicians for decades that feel that they have the most leeway to do this. And what we need is more parents and more citizens and more elected officials to stand up for them and just say, stop, enough. We're not going to stand for this.
Well, Diana, thank you for sharing the story. Thank you for the work that you've done. I mean, again, from Janice to this, and I know there have been a lot of victories in between. We're all very grateful to the good work that you're doing at Liberty Justice Center. Do you want to leave anybody with some final thoughts or action before we sign off for the day?
No, I just appreciate all of your supporters and all of the work that the network is doing to help buttress our work and support us in our efforts here. And if we keep standing up, we will be able to get these kids back in school or into a choice program or whatever it is that is the best for them, but we cannot let down the fight.
Thank you, Diana. And thanks to those of you who are tuning in. I think Diana summed it up very well. We're going to keep fighting. We are chalking up some pretty significant wins, and the door to education reform is wide open. We're continuing to push back against the opposition while trying to just bulldoze down the door that's open right now. So we will be in touch with more stories of success around education reform. And thank you guys for all you're making possible. We'll see you next time. Bye.